It's my pleasure to introduce Pratiksha, who is doing a research about decolonizing social work with Nepali women, and she is presenting about the case of Nepalese women and how social work can emancipate the struggle and those who are vulnerable and marginalized in this country from social work perspective. It is also my pleasure to introduce Pratiksha as one of my first PhD candidate, and who has done an excellent job so far. She is almost about to complete her PhD, and she is going to present part of her PhD in this seminar series. So over to you, Pratiksha.
Thank you, Raj, for that lovely introduction, and thank you for facilitating this series. Before I start my presentation, I would like to introduce myself officially. I'm Pratiksha Ghimire, and I'm doing my PhD on decolonizing social work with Nepali women under Raj's supervision. And I'm so excited to talk about some of the ideas emerging from my research with the academics and researchers who strive for change. As speaking of change, my research as a whole is about changes in perception, changes in perspectives, attitudes, and changes in contemporary discourse in social work, in particular with Nepali women. My title, my PhD thesis entitled Decolonizing Social Work with Nepali Women is, if I can say, is a long self-reflection and self-exploration of how and who I am, and how other Nepali women, general Nepali women, construct their own images, identity. They talk about how they talk about their issues, their needs for changes in their livelihoods. And it is also a reflection of myself as a global, as a woman in global landscape. But in the meantime, I do acknowledge that I am a Nepali woman with all my limitations, with all my expectations, with all my dreams and desires. And when I talk about social work, it gives me immense pleasure as social work strives for liberation, emancipation, empowerment, and to hand over those strengths for any woman or any vulnerable groups to take their own life decisions, impacting or influencing their own self-worth. With this note, I begin my presentation by starting my screen share. I hope everyone can see.
Yes, it's coming for me. Yeah.
Okay. So the presentation today I'm giving is a part of my ongoing research. For this presentation, I have chosen my second article, which I'm about to share, which I'm about to publish. So I have taken some of the abstracts, some of the concepts from that article, and given a new title for this one. It's called "Challenging Cultural Discourse within Decolonizing Social Work to Liberate Nepali Women." So before I begin the presentation, I would like to provide a brief introduction about myself and how I landed in social work and how I landed now doing PhD. So I recognize myself as a high-class, so-called high-class Nepali woman, high-caste Nepali woman. And with that, I also acknowledge I come with certain privileges and restrictions in my social upbringing. I have done my bachelor in art with major in social work and psychology in Nepal. Worthy to note that the social work education and curriculum is based on the blueprint of Western social work. And then after doing my bachelor, my undergrad, I migrated to Australia to study masters in social work, where I come to know about gender-sensitive and women-centered discussions and discourses in social work, how feminism can be related for the emancipation of women in general. But majorly what I have learned during my master's is more about the Western-centric social work with Nepali women. What are the characteristics of a Western woman, global woman? And in that sense, I can now then reflect what are the differences, what are the discrepancies in delivering social work back home and now what I have studied. And also because I myself am a woman, that gives me a certain privilege, certain standpoints to talk about social work in Nepal with relation to Nepalese women, because I can relate both my positionality intersects both the social work and as a and now, as Raj mentioned, I'm in the final stage of submission. So the background of this particular research reflects on the issues of Nepali women, their identities, their needs. So as a profession, social work draws on the principle of human rights, social justice, and doing so, it also talks about empowerment and liberation of people who have been long neglected, who have been long marginalized and oppressed. And in speaking that, when social work began its formal and professional academic as a profession, which started in 1996, it was supposed to the people in Nepalese society, they expected that social work could bring some transformation, some radical transformation in the lives of vulnerable and oppressed groups, those including women in Nepal as well. And during 1996, it was also the stage for the Maoist insurgency, with certain inequalities, differences in power distribution among the societal various groups. So in this sense, as social work that relies on the principles of social justice, equity, human rights, people wanted or expected that social work could actually bring some transformation. However, that was not the scenario, since social work has its principles, the foundation principles, which is taught in Nepal, thrives under the white Eurocentric principles and philosophies. And then when it was also imported via India, and that also contains the Indian philosophies that talks about the societies in general in India and what are the issues there. So when you draw from such colonial impressions, one from the UK and the USA, and one from the Indian philosophy, it really becomes difficult. It really becomes challenging to then take into a further stage where you can actually imply the practices, the methods, the approaches of social work in Nepalese society. More specifically, when you work with women in Nepal who have different identities, who have different places, who have different status and positionalities in Nepalese society, it really becomes difficult. And that's how, and that's why social work has overlooked the subject matter of Nepali women, their identities in general, and their issues. And it has become a really struggling path for the liberation because of its colonial impression. And there are various scholarly researches, various documentation, various discussions about what Nepalese society looks like in terms of their tradition, culture, beliefs, practices. And in saying that, every society has its own culture and it's important to recognize those cultures. But in saying so, there are so many issues with culture itself, which has been raised by various scholars and researchers, where Nepalese society's deep-rooted patriarchy and those cultural beliefs relegates women to subordinated roles, as well as this the culture, this tradition, these norms, these values, this belief also creates a barrier to their own liberation and empowerment. And while I was doing my, I was trying to figure out how I can actually learn or explore about what social status Nepalese women hold, or what Nepalese society characteristics look like, I think some very deep questions I need to pose, and the research question that I framed are those three main questions. So the first one is, what are the characteristics of Nepalese society regarding Nepalese women? What are the different attributes? What are some distinct qualities or certain philosophy of Nepalese society in regards to Nepalese women? How are they viewing Nepalese women? So that gives me to that comes to the another questions, where I ask, where are Nepalese women situated in Nepalese society in terms of their social positioning? What are their status that that have been relegated by Nepalese society? And then finally, how these characteristics of Nepalese society and the situation of Nepali women impact their positionality, impact their identities. So these are the main questions that I have posed in my article. And to answer about or to explore or to understand those questions, I utilized Kathy Charmaz' constructivist grounded theory, so as I can explore and understand the conversation between me and the participants that talks about their experiences, that talks about their personal and professional experiences of being women. What are the issues? How do they interpret on the social constructions about Nepali women? What knowledge do they hold about Nepali women? What are their identities? What are their positionalities? How Nepalese women itself sometimes view what's happening around them in terms of the culture, in terms of the religious beliefs, in terms of political scenario, in terms of the social understanding, in terms of economic understanding. So these are certain structures of this Nepalese society where I seek to understand how Nepalese women are being constructed. And in doing so, Kathy Charmaz' constructivist grounded theory also helped me to critically pose questions to examine the issues of power, inequality, marginality, and how these, in a together force, how do these together contribute to the construction of Nepali women from a social work perspective. This also helped me to focus on feminist epistemology, giving importance to the experiential, both private and personal, and both private and professional experiences that relates to the aspects of women's life, which have traditionally been ignored as a result of male-defined epistemologies. When I say I focus on feminist epistemology, what I try to say that it's their lived experiences, and I'm trying to figure out what their experiences are, what their understandings are, by keeping them as a knower. So I'm trying to know what their understanding are from their perspectives, who have gone through the experiences. And in many times, those identities are defined by the males. And this doesn't really equate to what I'm trying to do. I want to know their experiences. So hence, I have used, I try to use the feminist epistemology as well. And as I said earlier, social work as a profession that holds dear of the principles of social justice. So this, by exploring the issues of Nepalese women from Nepalese women themselves, provides the idea concerning fairness, provides the idea about equality and equity, social practices, cultural traditions, status and hierarchy, and it also seeks to explore about individual and collective rights of Nepalese society and Nepalese women in general. And then finally, it also explored the historical, social, cultural processes that determine who the women are in the present and how their identities and status will emerge in the future. Unless we focus on the present, unless we focus on the past, it's really difficult to understand what will happen in the future. If you don't know your roots, it's really difficult to challenge any discourses, to challenge any connotations, any philosophy, any traditional thought process where you want to go. So when I started interviewing them, I wanted to know what the present scenario is. And in the meantime, they also reflected about their past, their mothers, their grandmothers, and long traditional history of how women have been groomed, how women are, what are their struggles, and what will happen. They indicated on how the social work itself can improve, can reform, can advocate for the radical change for the future of Nepalese women as well. And for this, And for this, I have utilized snowball sampling. I have made connections. I have reached out to my previous connections back home in Nepal. And from them, I went on collecting some more participants who were really fantastic in exploring, in sharing their experiences open-heartedly and trying to build collaboratively on what social work can do to emancipate Nepali women. And I have interviewed 15 female Nepali social workers And sometimes people do ask me, why only female social workers? Well, for them, I do justify by saying that I am not trying to find out the experience of general Nepali women. I'm trying to find out the experience of Nepali women, but from social work perspective. And hence, only a female social worker can be a true representation to capture the essence of both Nepali social work and Nepali women. So I am not trying to go in one way, but I'm trying to incorporate both the essence of social work and how social work has been engaged with Nepali women. So as a female representation, as a female social worker, that makes the perfect combination for my understanding about social work on how they interpret or construct Nepalese women in Nepalese society. And this also helped me to minimize the opinionated perspective on engagement with Nepali women. So this is how I have done in terms of my methods and strategies, and to provide So after having a long discussions with Nepalese female social workers that went for about 90 minutes on average. So in terms of my questions, my research questions, I have identified certain characteristics of Nepalese society as per them. So these are the actual dialogues spoken by those Nepali female social workers. So as a whole, in general, the majority of female social workers, what they have described as Nepalese society to be a male hegemony. So one of the dialogues that one of the participants said that whether it's a job or any other life decisions, a woman is expected to be dependent on her husband if she is married. And if not, the woman is dependent on her father or brother. So everything that relates to woman has to be dependent on husband or the male figure of the family, or even on the society as a large. And this is still going on, and this is a still ongoing process and practices in Nepal. Further, a woman should mention her father's name or father-in-law's name or even husband's name when she has to introduce herself. So it is also issues of identity, like women cannot introduce themselves as a person. She has to be related to someone male and not even female. When I ask who are you, or whenever she goes on to school to drop her child, people ask who are you, and then she has to say I'm a daughter of someone, or even their husband's name, or even sometimes she has to introduce herself with the child she has. So there is no proper identity of herself as reported by many of the female social worker, my participants in the research. So this Nepalese society creates a difficult situation for Nepali women, and they are often treated as they belong to others. And there are certain sayings and phrases in Nepalese society, for example, "Arkako ghar jane jat," and that implies that a daughter is never her own parents. And with this sense, women are being groomed to be compromising, or women are being groomed to know that she is not a part of the family anymore in the near future. And she has to be compromising on many things since early age, including her education, including her hygiene, including her nutrition. So this is still happening. And sometimes women are even forced to produce as much as children as until she gives birth to a son. So it's more like a machine than a person. And people don't bother about what their desires are, what they want. If she wants to give birth, if she wants to go for further education, if she wants to get employed, if she wants to travel. So there is no concerns about what they want, what are their needs. And many times women have suffered for the sake of family's happiness and reputation, lost her self-respect and dignity. There is a strong hold of respect, the notion of respect, reputation of someone's family. So if something bad happens, or in terms of domestic violence or sexual assault or rape, such incidents are so serious, yet women are kept silent. They are not allowed to say. Even in the utmost space, their personal space, they are forced to stay shut. And that impacts on their self-respect, their self-dignity, because certain things don't happen to her, but then she is not allowed to express herself. So that impacts her emotionally, that impacts her physiologically, that impacts her psychologically, emotional. There is such a turmoil, but no one bothers about that. She is just someone who needs to hold the respect, who needs to hold the reputation of the family and nothing else. But at the same time, she is also not a part of the family. So this is an irony of Nepalese women. Where do they belong? They are not a part of their parents' family, and they are not fully integrated in the part of the in-laws family. So where do they stand? Where is their situation? What is their positionality in Nepalese society? And lastly, this Nepalese society's attributes and characteristics of being male hegemonic, and the situation that Nepalese women face, that's their inferior or subordinated positionality, impacts on the daily lives of Nepalese women, impacts on the position of their women, where there are a lot of barriers and restrictions. Young girls and women are being sent to government schools, and on the contrary, boys go to the English medium school. And sometimes many of the girls, they don't go to school anymore, or they don't go for further education because they have siblings to take care of. They have household to look around. They have cattle to feed. They have to raise them. And even if she gets married and she wants to pursue her employment or her job, they are forced to cease their employment because now she needs to take care of the family again. And if they want to travel further, there is again the issues of reputation, family's reputation and respect, which limits their further opportunities. So this is how, from the conversation of my participants, this is how I have come to understand what Nepalese society's characteristics are, what are the situation of Nepalese women, and how that impacts on Nepalese women overall. So after having the conversation, then I began my coding process utilizing grounded theory. And as you can see, this is quite, I'm proud of this diagram actually. So this is how I have done my coding, starting with the research questions, for which I have consulted and read through preliminary literatures, what they speak about Nepalese society, what they speak about women in general, what they speak about, what they have researched about Nepalese women in general. And that's how I posed my question on how do female Nepali social workers situate Nepalese women in terms of their social positioning. How are the notions around a Nepali woman has been constructed socially. And then I began my sampling and recruiting process. As I said earlier, I've used snowball sampling, and then I have also sent recruiting emails to the potential participants that I have gained from snowball sampling. And then I developed my questions, some in-depth interview questions, some were personal, and that provided me a different analysis of what Nepalese society look like. Who are Nepali women in general? How do they view themselves, or how do they view their identity in Nepali society? And then I started my initial coding, and that has been following through the conversation. I reflected, I went to check with the interviews that I did with the participants, and utilize some of their main dialects as initial codes. And then I focused, and then I moved further in focus coding, where, for example, in this one, I can use patriarchal nature of Nepalese society, and so on. And then I started to build theory, for this one, characteristics of Nepalese society. And then as a whole, to recapture everything, I have wrote substantive grounded theory for, if I'm talking about the coding process in grounded theory itself. So for this one, the whole the theory, the substantive theory would be the process of becoming fatalistic Nepalese woman. And I'm not trying to build a absolute theory, since this is a qualitative, since this is a social science related research. I just wanted to build on some foundations where other researchers can move on further, carrying the same, my work, so that they can add on more dimensions. And in the whole process, starting from sampling to writing a substantive theory, I've used concurrent data generation and analysis. At the same time, I constantly use constant comparison to reach the theoretical sufficiency. And by the 15th interview, I realized that I have enough data to build up on a theory that really captures the essence of what I'm trying to explore and understand. So this is how my coding process look like. And of course, at the end of writing substantive theory, I've used secondary literature review that confirms what I have found out through or I have learned through the interactions, through the conversation with my participants as well. So how does everything relates or interplays to construct Nepali woman? As shown in the figure, I have utilized the questions that I'm trying to find answers to, that I'm trying to understand, characteristics of Nepali woman, situation for Nepali woman, and how that impacts on Nepali woman. So when I say the characteristics of Nepali woman, it is the attributes that I have gathered from my participants that talks about patriarchal values, that talks about androcentrism, that talks about control. How the Nepali society itself creates androcentrism, where everything is defined by males, be it social positioning, be it economic privilege, be it political development. So everything is centered around male. And I said earlier how even the identity of someone is related to male. They have no identity, women have no identity of themselves. So this is how Nepali society creates situation of Nepali woman that promotes stereotyping, that also promotes Nepalese women to be of a second-class citizen. And to be a woman in Nepali society is a really struggle. So that's what it says when I say Mahila huna nikai garo cha. So given the burden of families' respect, given the social grooming, given the social upbringing, given the certain limitations, how that has created Nepalese women to create discrimination, limitations, and restrictions. And those are the effects on Nepali women. And the discrimination being, as I said earlier, in education, the limitation on being that creates barrier for their further opportunities, and restrictions on their dressings as well. How do they have to dress? How do they have to behave? They have to be shy, or they have to speak softly. You cannot speak loudly. That would be called as rude. That would be called as someone who has no manners. So this is all how Nepalese woman has been portrayed by Nepalese society. And this circle continues forever. Even though there are so many laws and reforms from the government of Nepal regarding women's empowerment and liberation, the issues of Nepalese women are not being listened to. They are being heard, but it's a different thing when it comes to an action, to implying in action. The policies are absolutely fantastic. There is no doubt about it. But when in terms of actually practicing, there has been no significant progress as explained by my participants. And this cycle, the characteristics of Nepali society creates situation for Nepali women, which then produces the effects on Nepali women. And as a result of this one, women have normalized what they have been facing or how they have been positioned in Nepali society. For example, they give me the situation for their mothers, how she was groomed or how she had sacrificed and how her grandmother has done so. And so this is an ongoing, long historical process, and this comes in a cycle, and there is no breaking off, because woman has accepted that. Woman has accepted that all these discriminations, all this control, all these stereotypes, all their situation has been fate for them. That's what they have assured themselves. This is such a complex position for them, for the women of this generation who are doing social work practice with women. When they say that those who are working in projects and the beneficiaries of those projects are women, when they say that they want to change, but they cannot break the cycle, they cannot question the culture. So this is such a complex position for them. They feel like they are in a pendulum for the change, but then also they have accepted those things, and it's really difficult for them. And that can be interpreted as bleak and fatalistic Nepali woman. That's how I have constructed the notion of Nepali woman from Nepalese society, from the perspective of Nepalese female social worker. And I can really relate to this one, because I am now living in abroad, doing my studies, working, and I have a family back home. And many times, certain decisions about me, about myself, has been guided. Many times, I try to question, I try to argue, but then the same thing, the cultural pattern, the societal values, the attributes does seize my capacity to take decision on my behalf for myself as well. And see the irony that I am now independent. I am living on my own, but still I cannot take the decision. So how on earth can Nepali women be empowered when they are still living with the same cultural and traditional values that has been long practiced, that has been long accepted, that has been long normalized in Nepalese society? And this also gave me some preliminary insights to emancipate Nepali women from social work perspective. And that comes in certain stages that we need to recognize, that we need to consider, that we need to really realize if we are to emancipate Nepali women. First, we need to understand what Nepalese society is and how Nepalese society holds the social status of Nepali women. As I said earlier, it's about patriarchy. You need to recognize, you need to speak out, and about the androcentric space as well. You need to speak about cultural and religious dominance, the uncritical applause or the uncritical acceptance of social and cultural philosophy is really dangerous for someone who is talking about emancipation. If you cannot analyze what's happening to you, it's really difficult to change anything. It's also about recognizing identity crisis. It is also about freedom and independence, and how those freedom and independence has been hindered, has been restricted, has been controlled in terms of Nepalese women. And finally, how Nepalese society holds societal attitudes toward women who are working, toward women who does not bear a child, towards women who wants to go abroad. So these are the things that we need to recognize, and also combined with colonial sentiments of Nepali social work. We need to understand that our study materials is still being guided by US, UK, and India, though there are certain advocates who channelize the situation of Nepalese women, to channelize the context of Nepal, to talk about those things with their students, but it's purely based on personal efforts. There is no effort from the discipline, there is no effort from the profession to talk about those things, how we can contextualize. And there is less content on national context. There are the methods and approaches are colonial, that purely relies on psychological and medical approaches to address any social issues. And we need to understand that Nepalese society is not individualistic. It's more of a collective nature. And no person, in general, no person can take any decisions about themselves by themselves. They need to consult their families, and even sometimes they need to consult with the larger society to address their needs, to talk about certain issues. So this is what we need to understand, that using individualistic methods and approaches won't address the social issues, won't address the issues of people in general. And that too, when it comes to Nepalese women, when there are no space to talk about their issues and needs, it's really difficult. If you want to call a woman to the office, she won't be able to do that. So there needs to have a different approaches. The seminars and workshops are very limited in relation to empowerment of women. We do talk about feminism. We do talk about progress and achievements of Nepali women and how they have progressed so far. But it's really important. It's really crucial to understand what the context was to achieve that success or progress. And those are the things that are not being imparted. The data is a different thing, and the reality, the ground reality is very different. We need to explore, we need to make visible of those realities as well. And there is also concern about placement on how placement regarding women, placement regarding any social issues when graduates go for their placement, how that can channelize the social work practices into them, how they can build up, how they can create their framework should be contextual. You are reading one thing and then the scenario is different where you are doing your placements. How do you connect those two? It has been a really challenge for them as explained by my participant, that it's totally different of what we read and what we practice. And that's where the challenges comes in when we talk about emancipation of Nepalese women. It is really difficult to challenge the social reality of Nepali women. And there has been uncritical lens to address the social reality of Nepali women. We talk about global women, we talk about Western women, but what is the social reality of Nepali women? There has been no discussions, there has been no proper discussion, I say, about and debates concerning Nepali women. And to question or to challenge the deeply rooted cultural values is another difficult task to achieve. As I said, you don't want to question the social fabric, but then that social fabric, that culture itself has created the barrier for them to emancipate, to liberate, to become empowered. And following that one, another challenge that I think is pertinent in social work, in Nepali social work, is the uncritical application of decolonized discourse. When we talk about decolonizing, and it is a hot cake in global landscape in social work, we need to use decolonized discourse. But for me, this decolonized discourse, when we talk about culture, when we talk about context-sensitive social work, isn't this context itself for Nepali women is problematic? Who is questioning, who is thinking about those things? We say we need to promote culture, but the culture is not promoting Nepali women. It is the issue itself, as reported by so many participants. And another challenge is elitism in global conversation. We talk about Women's Day, International Women's Day. We talk about achievements of women, but all these discussions, all these debates are centered around the cities, the urban areas. We're not talking about how a village woman has started living her livelihood, or even a disabled woman has started living their livelihood. That is one of the major achievements for her. Who is talking about that? Why isn't she in the center of discussion? So these are the things, these are the challenges in social work in Nepal, and how we can strive for changes. We need to contextualize the syllabus, the contents, and address the Western hegemony of women-centric social work. Social work is different in different contexts, and we need to understand that. So we need to build up and develop a contextual syllabus that address to the particular and specific needs of Nepali women. We have 7 provinces in Nepal. Different provinces have different social issues and different social issues of Nepali women. So we need to contextualize. We need to at least explore about what's happening with the Nepali woman. What are their needs? What are the issues? And it's of course, social work has been a colonial product, and it has given us so many values and principles, but we need to address the hegemony of those social work that's working around women. It's not, the issues of women are diverse, even within Nepal, even within 2 kilometers. So we need to realize that it needs to be contextualized. And leadership of the concern is very important for seeking change. Women have never been the center of voice, center of attraction for raising their issues. They are always in the second positions in any landscape, social, political, economic involvement, any involvement. So we need to seek change in that one. We need to give them space. We need to ask to come to the universities or the colleges and talk about them, talk about their struggles, talk about their achievements. So there needs to be the leadership of the concern. When we develop syllabus and contents about Nepali women, and it's really a high time to include subject matter of Nepali women in Nepali social work. So we need to seek out those who are working in those fields, who have the experiences of working with women. We shouldn't restrict ourselves with global women or global feminism. There are different issues within hand, and we need to talk about those things. And finally, integrating Nepali women's unique standpoints. As I said earlier, I have used feminist epistemology, and they are the knower. They are the person who have gone through the experiences. They know their reality. And that's where we need to start integrating their standpoints, their perspectives. And one of the shocking idea that my participant gave me was that there are so many NGOs working in Nepal for the empowerment of Nepali women, and there are so many projects within the NGOs. And when the participant work with Nepali women, or there are some new projects that are targeted to Nepali women, the women in that region say that they don't need any more. They know their reality. They know what they need. Who doesn't know is the other aspects of Nepali society. What they mean is men needs to know what our needs are. We know our needs, and the projects are enough. We don't need anymore. So this is what they have reflected, that they know their experiences, they know their realities, they have struggled through the experiences, and now they have learned about empowerment via projects, NGOs, and donor agencies. So where is the progress? Why isn't we seeing the progress? So it's not the issue. It's not the problem with women itself. It's the problem of the society. And the society people needs to know. They probably what they are saying, that maybe we need to target the projects towards men. Because many times when projects are created and they want female participants, the female participants need to have approval from their family. They need to have signature of their husbands or their father that they can go to the projects. So where is this happening? Who are the drivers of what is responsible for them? It's the men in Nepali society in any aspects. And lastly, deconstructing the notion of decolonization. As I said earlier, it's not decolonizing. We need to act on the decolonization in true sense if we want to emancipate Nepali women. We need to recognize the positive and negative aspects of culture. You cannot just go and blindly follow what culture has taught you. As a woman, as an educated woman, you can differentiate what's happening with you. And that's where the notion of deconstructing the decolonization can fit in Nepalese society from social work perspective to liberate Nepali women. So that was the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. And I open the floor to any comments or suggestions or feedbacks. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Jen, do you have any question? You put so many things in the chat.
I know, I put all these comments there just because I do similar research, and so every time you were talking,